Welcome to another episode of Acts of the Blood God, an independent RPG podcast. I'm your host, Kat Bailey. I'm joined, as always, by my lovely co-host, Eric Van Allen.
Hello, good morning. We were just talking about days before we started this podcast, like normal humans do. You know, just completely normal human conversation.
Sunday, definitely a B-tier day of the week, still the weekend. But at the same time, you're looking into the dreaded maw. That is Monday. On the other hand, Monday is okay because that is the day that the recorded version of Acts of the Blood God comes out. So you can look forward to that on Mondays. Mondays, underrated. But we're not going to talk about that. We're going to be talking about the demise, unfortunately, of Game Informer and the substantial layoffs that hit Bungie. It was a very rough week, unfortunately, last week. And here to join us in that conversation are our two special guests. Nicole.
Hello, hi.
Joined by Nicole Carpenter from Polygon.
I forgot that I was supposed to introduce myself.
No, to be clear, Kat told you before this podcast, I'm going to tell you, Nicole, introduce yourself. And then when Kat started the podcast, the one thing Kat forgot to do was, Nicole, introduce yourself. And I was sitting here like, oh no.
Screw it, we're doing live. And also joining us is Sadia Ahmed from Fanbyte.
Hello.
And we are going to be talking, as I already mentioned, about everything that's been happening with Bungie and Game Informer. But before we get to that, a little bit of housekeeping. If you enjoy the show, please leave us a review on the podcatcher of your choice. You can follow me on Twitter at @the_catbot. Eric is at cmusi. Nicole, where can we find you?
I'm at Sweet Potatoes on Twitter.
And Sonia, where can we find you?
I'm Sonia GA on Twitter.
We're also on Patreon at patreon.com/bloodgodpod, where we've been doing a huge runoff vote for the latest Pantheon vote. These were the games selected by the mods, and we came down to Golden Sun 2 and Shining Force 2. Eric, what are the results?
The results, at a thrilling 51-49 finish, down to the wire and separated by less than double digits of votes, Shining Force 2 is our game.
Hey, let's go. I'll admit, I put my thumb on the scale a little bit for this one. When I looked at the voting, I said, I'm personally voting for Shining Force 2, and I think I swung the vote a little bit. Brought in the emphasis of the Blood God. I think I guess I'm capable of doing that.
I mean, there was a lot of swing voting happening because it came to light last night as we discovered that Teeps, one of our mods, who also submitted a game for this vote, could have ended the vote, but at the last minute changed their vote to a different game, thus creating the full-on tie that led to the runoff. So Teeps did create the drama, and so you were not the only swing vote happening in this.
So Brian picked Shining Force 2. Brian C. Nerd, our longest standing mod. And Brian, since your game won, I'm just putting out a standing invitation to come on the Pantheon episode and talk about why you think Shining Force 2 should be in the Pantheon. In the meantime, we are going to be releasing an episode on Wednesday. Our Pokemon Red and Blue Pantheon. We have our special guest, Callie Plaguey, also from Polygon, Nicole's coworker. And we're going to be recording that on Tuesday, August 6th for the patrons of the Stars of Destiny. So let's please look forward to that. And finally, our charity stream benefiting Trans Lifeline is happening in just 2 weeks, August 17th and 18th. You'll be seeing a lot more info about that soon, but we've been gathering up a lot of great giveaways. We've got a ton of amazing events. We may be streaming the creation of our Baldur's Gate 3 characters from when we're streaming through that together. It's going to be great. Please look forward to it. Okay. Now moving on to the main topic of the podcast. On Thursday, Game Informer suddenly shut down and the staff was laid off. It was a magazine that had been around for 33 years. It was in my hometown, and it brought out a lot of feelings, I think, in the games media, sadly, because I think we all knew people who worked at Game Informer at one point or another. It was one of the longest standing game magazines. Eric, I know that you in particular had some feelings around it.
Yeah, I mean, on a personal level, Game Informer was something I read growing up. I wrote up the news for Destructoid, and to take the picture for the lead image or whatever, I was like, I'm not going to just rip an image off their site. Also, it was impossible to rip an image off their site because they took the entire archives down and replaced it all with a letter that who could say if a machine wrote that or not? Who could honestly say? But that's all one thing. So there was no actual thing to grab an image from unless you went on the Wayback Machine. So I went over, I had props today, and grabbed some of my old Game Informers that I still have. So this is the Fallout 3
the OG
Game Informer. Yeah. I have ones here going all the way back to 2007 and stuff like that. Even when I was younger, the Final Fantasy X Game Informer was one of the first gaming magazines I remember reading, and it's, I've said before that I didn't really start wanting to do games media, games journalism until I was much older, but even when I was younger, I was a voracious reader, a voracious writer, and the idea that someone could speak this way, could talk this way to games, that could investigate the way that games happen, the people that play games, analyze the things that happen in games, write reviews around them, and write these big features. The Fallout 3 feature is incredible, by the way. I was reading it again last night, and it's honestly a really interesting piece of preview work. It was all amazing.
They did great.
To me.
They did great documentaries, and so as I mentioned, they were based in my hometown, and so there's random little history. My friend from high school was the first person in Minnesota to buy an Xbox, so they had their picture in the Game Informer when the Xbox launched way back in the day. And when I was trying to break into the games media, Andy McNamara was one of the first people that I emailed, and he very graciously read my email and responded, and I even said nice things about my portfolio, which kind of gave me the sort of confidence, I think, to keep going and eventually break in. I always thought that I would work for Game Informer, and in a way I'm surprised that I never did, but it would have necessitated moving back to Minnesota. But I had a lot of good friends, especially among the sort of the OG staff that were around back in the 2010s. So Nicole, it kind of speaks to the tough times in the games media, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's devastating. It's devastating to hear, and it's really a shame because it feels like Game Informer was one of the very rare instances where the editorial management seemed to really allow their writers to be curious and send them on these incredible trips to seek out stories. I can't think of another website or publication that had the budget or to do that, to be you can go. I think Blake wrote a story about, and maybe it was for Spelunky. And went to go into the caves with the developer. That's so cool, and you don't see stuff like that very, very often. And the second thing that is so devastating is I have also lost some archive, some of the stories that I've written for other publications like Rolling Stone. And that's only a handful of stories, and it feels really, really bad that's not there anymore. I can't imagine just the entire archive, the entire website is just poof.
So
Yeah.
It's mind blowing.
It's bad on multiple levels because number one, the writers there, either current, former, freelance, whatever, like now no longer have an archive. And sure, you can wayback machine the text. Like actually getting the text is not the difficult part. The difficult part is when you go to new editors and say like, "Hey, I used to write for XYZ." And it doesn't exist anymore. It's not there anymore. There's something about having a published clip that does it admittedly like makes you look better to editors. Like I've experienced this with the closure of like USG and places that I used to freelance at, like Playboy's gaming arm and stuff like that. Like those completely disappeared into the ether, and some of the USG got backed up on VG 24/7. But like that's losing that
Not
for the
all of
writers.
it.
Not all of it.
We lost a lot of our reviews.
Yeah, and a lot of like my random news pieces or opinion pieces and stuff like that. Some of them went over, some of them did not. And the other factor there is you lose an archive. You lose like so much history of GI over the years. There have been a lot of people who cover retro games on YouTube and stuff like that who've been talking about that in the last few days, that like those pieces were important as like archives of interview quotes, of developer discussions, of like talking to people and people like saying things. Like it sounds so arbitrary, but like having those quotes on hand is important, and we lose them so fast in the turnover of the internet. And like I've experienced it trying to write retro features, and like you have to way back and you have to dig and you have to look for like places where this stuff is archived, because oftentimes the original source is just not online anymore, and that's bad for preservation.
And let's just have a little bit of appreciation for physical media. I got a little box full of old gaming magazines, and when I open them, first of all, I don't have to go trawling through the internet for them. And second of all, they're like a snapshot in time of a particular moment in gaming history and the culture. And you feel like as you're paging through it, not only are the layouts really nicely considered and everything, it has, weirdly, we always thought of the print as being too limited for really thoughtful writing, like that the internet, you could just write forever. You have no page limit. But on the internet, time became the limiting factor because you got to get that story out at some point. Whereas in the magazine, you could spend a couple weeks just mulling over the story, getting it carefully edited and everything. And so yeah, it's just a real bummer that one of the last magazines standing in the U.S. is going by the wayside. But Sonia, do you have any thoughts on what went down with Game Informer?
Yeah, I was really surprised to hear, because I thought it'd be like one of the, like, I guess it would last forever. I thought like, that'd be like the one print publication that would be there. But it was pretty sad, because like I still do freelancing, and I was always hopeful, like, oh, I'll get one more chance to write in the magazine, hopefully. I was lucky enough to have one of my interviews in the magazine. I think it was like 2 years ago. I interviewed the dev at Venba. And that was like a big moment for me, because I got to write about like something that was like culturally significant to me, and then having it like in print media, like in a magazine, you got all the images and you have my byline there and like the questions I asked and everything. And it's just cool to see that. And then I showed it off to everybody. And I had like extra copies, so I gave it to like my in-laws, I gave it to my parents.
Oh.
And then my local library, I didn't even know it at the time, had like a magazine section. I was like wandering around, and I saw some of the magazines, and then mine was like right in the front. That what do you call it? The front was the cover. I saw the cover, and I like ran to it, and I opened it up, and then I was there with my husband. I was like, "Oh my God, look! I'm like this is a library like I grew up in, like, and then seeing the Game Informer magazine with my name in it in that library, it was just such a cool moment. I was really thinking about that when I heard the news, because I know like not just me, there's so many people that had like a special moment with Game Informer magazine, like the actual print and online. Yeah, it was just it doesn't make sense. And then like getting rid of like, or like not letting anyone access the website, and not even the people who like spent so much of their life, dedicated so much of their life, their time to keep the site afloat. It just is such a like lack of respect, I guess, because working in this space, you have people that aren't always so nice to you, like in like gamers in general, and then you have some companies that don't really respect your work as much too. So it's like tough seeing how games media is now, and then this is just like a really, I don't know what to really say about it. Just like a big sigh.
Mm,
I think the thing
yeah.
that I took away from it, and I posted about this on Twitter, was like, we're losing not just like a group of writers that were working together and collaborating, but we're losing an institution. And like that's the thing about a lot of the layoffs, and like when you get to site closure level, is that like when you're coming up in this industry, you know, where do you go to learn? Because there aren't a lot of on-ramps in games journalism. There really isn't. And I deal with a lot of writers every day. I edit their work. I collaborate with them. I try to like impart knowledge on them, because that's kind of my role as someone that's been in media now for too long. And those institutions where that thing can happen, especially for people who didn't come up with training in J school or anything like that, those are disappearing when we have moments like that. You know, institutional knowledge is a critical part of making this space better. And when you lose institutions, now that knowledge scatters to the winds. And you can say that like, oh, media will survive because, you know, people will have their Patreons and they'll all go crowdfund. But number one, there's like limited dollars to go around. I think anybody who started a crowdfunded venture can attest to that. But number two, that works for the people in already. That works for the people who got in. It doesn't do anything for the people who are breaking in right now. It doesn't give them on-ramps. It doesn't give them places to learn. It doesn't give them places where they can gain that institutional knowledge and become those people who could have their own personal followings. So now we're like cutting out a lot of the infrastructure of this thing. And I was really appreciative that some devs were out there saying like, this is like bad for devs too, because yes, like a GI cover was really big for marketing and PR and like a big push. It was great to have like a game like Sea of Stars or something like that on a Game Informer cover. It looks fantastic. The Hades 2 cover that I have right here is gorgeous. I love it. But like
Some great art on those covers.
oh god,
yes.
yeah. But losing the places that can highlight stuff like that can spotlight stuff like that can hold the industry accountable like that, is like you're losing this function of the machine that now the self-checks, the self-regulation, the ability to highlight, to promote good stuff, to call out bad stuff. When that disappears, it just lets bad acting run rampant. And so losing institutions hurts.
Somebody was lamenting on social media about how basically games media has been farmed out to YouTube and places like that. And I mean, there's some really amazing people who are doing great work on YouTube, but there's also so many bad actors out there as well. And it's kind of a forbidding landscape. And we need more than video essays. We need more than your typical YouTube review and that kind of thing. There is something wholesome. There is something nourishing about good reporting, among other things. So
I think about I was just going to say like the John Oliver piece that he did a while back that was about all of the corporations that were gobbling up newspapers around the country. He specifically highlighted how like his show, which is honestly like video essays on HBO, basically like he does video essay work in like cable TV format, but like that is largely built on the reporting and interviewing and news investigating, like beat by beat reporting of other places. And video essays are the same way. Like those are like by and large, if you are doing something that has news in it, that has interviews in it, that has insight in it, if that person has not sought it out themselves, they are like relying on the reporting of others. And that's fine. That's how that ecosystem is supposed to work. That's good. But when you cut out the bottom part, what happens to the top? And yeah.
Very unfortunate loss from the games media. And then in the meantime, another institution, Bungie, had major layoffs this week. 220 workers lost their job. A further 155 workers are being moved over to Sony. There was a lot of rumors and conversation about whether or not a Destiny 3 had been canceled. We kind of learned now that they were in fact working on a spin-off called Payback, or codenamed Payback perhaps, that is basically being shut down, if I recall correctly. Luke Smith, former games media person from 1UP, who directed Destiny 2 at one point, apparently among those who were pushed out. This was sort of a long time coming. Nicole, how did we get to this point?
Gosh, it's really a devastating point to get to, and I think probably really confusing if you look at like the trajectory of Destiny 2, because they just had that expansion come out and it did really well. And even though people said that Lightfall was like a quality miss, was the quote, a lot of people played that as well. It had more players at its peak than the last one, and admittedly it did have a lower a lower downfall, the lowest player base was very, very low. But I think that it's both a product of what's going on larger in the video game industry, and a lot of companies projected in 2021, when investment was very, very high, that it would stay that way, that it led to irresponsible growth, and now workers are paying for those bad decision making, and that's what we're seeing here with these studios cutting roles, cutting other sorts of benefits. And I think Destiny is like partially has its own. I think that probably Lightfall plays into that as well. I don't follow Destiny 2 as a player. I have followed the story around it, so I don't know exactly like how the expansions played into the perception of the game, and if that extremely low player base like played into people losing their jobs or whatnot. But I do think it's a product of the larger ecosystem of the video game industry, with games being more expensive to make, that irresponsible growth, the time it takes to make this stuff. It's really devastating to see, and also feels like it was avoidable to have layoffs at this scale across the industry, including at a company like Bungie.
Yeah, there was over on the Xbox FTC trial, one of the things that came out when Xbox was considering its various acquisitions, Bungie came up, and it was considered to have a high burn rate, as in like it was burning through a lot of cash. And I guess they had a lot of projects going up. They had a lot of incubation projects happening, and they couldn't necessarily support all of that. And in the meantime, Destiny 2, which is now 7 years old, I believe. I think it came out in 2017, and has been, it's been kind of shrinking a bit as players move on to other things. Different game, but games like Fortnite and such came out after Destiny 2, if you can believe that. So it's not exactly a new game, and it's also a very hard game for newcomers to get into. I think the original Destiny 2 is literally inaccessible at this point, so it's very, very, very confusing, I think. Sonia, as someone who's spent a lot of time with Destiny 2, I'm wondering if you can talk to me a little bit about the perception that players have around it in 2024 and around some of the latest expansions.
I think after the Witch Queen came out, that a lot of players had hope for the rest of Destiny 2 for Lightfall and the final shape. But after Lightfall was not really, it didn't really win back some players, but it wasn't really like their most successful expansion either. I know some people were saying that there was like really low player sentiment, or that like it was at an all-time low, and that could have contributed to like their round of layoffs last year. Like I think it was in October. And that they'd be, taking steps to win players back. I don't think the final shape. I know a lot of players liked the final shape because it really catered to like the 10 years of Destiny 2. Like it had that nostalgia. It really relied on nostalgia, and then it brought back some characters, and then it had like a new structure to the game too. Like it was like a linear expansion instead of like being like a open world expansion right off the bat where everybody gets everything in the beginning. You kind of like had like this final story that takes you through like the journey of Destiny 2. And I think having such a like kind of like how people are saying like a Avengers type of like final moment with everything coming together. It was a little too late for Bungie. I think for me personally, I didn't really like the final shape as much because I'm really into the Destiny 2 lore, and I felt like the game had a lot to offer, and I don't really like it when Bungie relies on nostalgia so much because I personally think it's overplayed, and it's been used throughout Destiny 2 to relied on Destiny 1 to kind of bring players to Destiny 2. I think at some points with like the Galahorn and like bringing back some of the destinations from Destiny 1. I don't know. It's just felt like it was really up and down. I don't think I ever knew for certain where Destiny 2 or Destiny in general was going for the past 10 years. And I kind of wish it ended after the 10-year mark. Because even now, I've been a player for so many years, but after I completed the final shape, I think I played a few missions in the first episode that's going on right now that they have like as a replacement for seasons, but I haven't gone back since June. So even personally for me, I think I'm kind of done with Destiny 2 and like ready to move on.
Right?
Yeah.
The constant cadence of content drops and everything, and everybody always really praised Destiny 2's like shooting and everything, and it was a great game to play with your friends and all that. But there has to be a shelf life for all of this. No matter how much you weaponize RPG elements, at some point people aren't going to stick around forever, unless it's World of Warcraft, in which case you're going to somehow exist like for 20 years.
So that's kind of the interesting thing to me about all this. So we're in an age and an era of like the narrative arc, and let me like establish this concept real quick. So like I feel like the MCU popularized this the most. Of we're going to have this big narrative arc, it's all going to build to this one moment, we're going to get to Infinity War and Endgame, and everything will tie in, it'll be one big moment. And like Destiny 2 had that with the final shape and the Witness and all that, and Final Fantasy XIV had that with everything that happens all the way up to Endwalker. Like all this stuff where like everything is the culmination of it all. And even 14 feels kind of weird because honestly the like train tracks leading there didn't get laid down until like Shadowbringers, like arguably, which is like right before Endwalker. But like now a lot of franchises that have done that are trying to figure out what you do after that, and Destiny 2 is like fresh off it, so they've only done like the first 2 episodes, I think they're calling them now, the new seasonal structure, which already an alteration of their seasonal structure indicates that they were thinking about like the old way we did things was not working, was not like doing what we needed it to do for this service. 14 Dawn Trail just came out. I think it's been fairly well received, but it has like noticeably been like It's kind of a weird step forward. We're kind of figuring out where this goes from here. MCU is famously like slamming its face on the pavement right out of the gate. And they're pulling the ripcord that says Robert Downey Jr. on it. And, it's literally like everyone tries to figure out when you build these narrative arcs what comes next, because there is something about when you build that momentum, it's not just something where you can have that big moment, that big culmination. I did hear from a lot of people that played the final shape that they were having some like mixed thoughts and reactions all the way up to that last moment, and they were like, yeah, like the big ending, like they nail the ending, like some cool stuff happens, there's a lot of characters showing up, it's that like end game moment, it's neat, like you can't not like that if you've played Destiny for this long. But like it does result in this moment afterwards where you're like, well what's next? And it's almost like now that you've removed that momentum that was pushing you forward for so long, that was in the sails, like now there's no wind in that sail anymore. What is pushing you forward? What does come next? And how do you try to like build that scale up again when you've spent so much time and energy building it previously? I think Warframe is pretty good at this. Like Warframe has been doing this sort of thing for a while, of building these big up and down arcs, and the community has gotten used to following that, and I think they're building up to a new one again now with Warframe 1999, and it's actually like making me sit here and go like, Warframe, that might be kind of neat. I might want to check that out. I think a lot of Destiny players are also looking at that and being like, maybe we hop ship for a while Destiny figures its stuff out. And it's difficult because that requires time, it requires resources, it requires a lot of talent on staff, and it requires a lot of faith in everybody involved that like we're not going to pull the Robert Downey Jr. ripcord. we're not going to freak out, we're not going to panic, we're not going to go to the first thing that we think is going to like solve the problem.
Nostalgia.
And when you see layoffs like this, I feel like that is in some ways not a show of faith that like that whoever is making the decisions believes that the talent at Bungie can do that stuff. And I think that sucks, honestly, because like you're kind of kneecapping whatever efforts they have moving forward now of like the talent that was making this stuff happen. There were a lot of people being let go, and people being let go who worked on some pretty big
narrative
stuff.
Team.
Right.
Yeah, it's the narrative team. There was like a QA tester who was basically like other Bungie employees were on there saying like this person is like directly responsible for like making sure that stuff like Salvation's Edge was like functional and worked as well as it did and like happened. And like these people who made these big moments in Destiny 2 so far happen are now not on the team. So like are all chips on Marathon now? Or like what are they trying to do next? I feel like where is the faith at the end of the day? And that's going to take a lot of the momentum out of Bungie, even if they want to continue forward with Destiny 2 in the way that they have been previously.
Yeah, you brought up institutional knowledge when we were talking about Game Informer, and that totally applies here too. It's losing developers who have that kind of history, not only with Destiny, but with Bungie as a whole, is really bad for the company with regards to morale and like development. Even if they're not going to be working on Destiny, a team that has that history together, you see how it works, and it works well. And it's such a huge loss for the company to see that kind of institutional knowledge just tossed away.
Very much so. I mean, you look at a game like Final Fantasy XIV, where I think that just by virtue of the way that Japanese workforces tend to work and how hard it is to lay people off, you end up having a team that sticks together and knows each other really, really well. Even with like some of them moving on to go work on Final Fantasy XVI, the rest were able to kind of pick up the slack and do well with Dawn Trail. Nicole, I'm wondering, what's your take? And this sort of applies to like MMORPGs. It applies to a lot of different games. We're an RPG-focused podcast, and a lot of these service games grew out of RPGs, right? Gaining experience, loot, that sort of thing. But there's been sort of a loss of faith in service games recently, not just on the player side, but on the developer side as well. It's like, how can service games get better? How can service games be sustainable?
When Eric was talking about what's next for Destiny, I kept thinking, like, does there have to be a what's next for Destiny 2? Like, obviously the game's not going to go away because people are going to keep playing it, and it would be a devastating loss, I think, for the game to simply go away. But I think it's worth, in instances where something isn't working and when you've reached a logical end to it, which, I didn't play the final shape. I haven't played Destiny in a very, very long time. So I don't know I can't say this for certain, but it sounds like it was a pretty solid like end point, a culmination. And to push it past that, if it's going to be forcing it past that, like, do you have to continue the story in that way? What if you did try to do something new? I think Warframe 1999 is like a really good example of something different like that. I think that was really a smart comparison there. But the thing that keeps coming to me is like, if this is the culmination and this is like the final act of this, it's okay for it to for the team to move on and to focus elsewhere. Destiny 2 maybe can continue. It will obviously continue with these episodes, but like I don't think I don't think every game has to be the forever game. Like, that has been popular, and I think that developers and studios are kind of moving away from that mindset a little bit after like Halo Infinite. It's not the forever game. You didn't think so. That people were thinking, but I think that it's okay to move on. And I think that that's the solution really for service games to get better, is to like know when to call it. And I don't know if Destiny 2 is at that place because I haven't played it for so long. So these are kind of general thoughts, but yeah, that's my thought there, is like, if this is the culmination of it, then just like, it's okay. It's okay. Everything doesn't have to go on forever.
I also don't know if they said anything about like if they're gonna remove the episodes after it's done and when they move on to the second episode, kind of like how they're recycling through seasons. Because like once you're done with a set of seasons for that expansion year, it would get moved to the Destiny content vault, so it'd be like out of the game. And then a lot of people didn't like that because you're removing like chunks of the game that you played, like parts of the story are like completely gone from the game. And then they did end up bringing some things back to like keep the continuity, but I don't know what they could do going forward because it's still Destiny 2, and they're just adding more stuff on. So like, even with these giant episodes, because the current one is from June, and it's gonna end in October, and has 3 acts. So like, what are they gonna do with it? Like, is it gonna just leave Destiny 2 once the second episode starts? So I don't know if they said anything about that.
I think there were some leaks and reports, so take it with a grain of salt, that like they're going to a like lesser structure at some point, and obviously we'll know more when they tell us more on that front. But to your point, Sonia, about like the content, that is another thing that you look at Warframe or Final Fantasy XIV, and having the availability of content actually makes those games pretty easy to on-ramp on, and also like experience the game as it was intended. Because I actually do really like the story of Destiny 2. I think it's a really fascinating story. I think the characters and the writing of that world are really, really good. But to get a lot of that, honestly, it feels like at some point the accepted answer was to just go watch, Bife's lore videos or whatever. like go on YouTube and watch a like 1 hour, 2 hour, 4 hour lore recap, so all the story going into the final shape or whatever, because most of it doesn't exist in the game anymore. And literally last night I was playing Final Fantasy XIV, and we were just running old like Sorrows of Werelit and Warring Triad trial duties from like years ago for mounts and farming and triple triad cards, and you can still readily easily access that and even run it at different levels, so like unsynced, so you can just roll in there with your level 100 character and just beat up on a boss that's like level 40 like just like run it fast for mount farming and stuff. And it's like, if these games can figure that out and do that, Bungie, we talked about the burn rate earlier, right? Like how much money they're spending, and a lot of that was apparently going into a lot of different things. Obviously making any of these games is not a cheap endeavor, and they're also building Marathon as we speak. And then there was at least one incubation project that was spun out now into a separate thing within Sony, and that's something that we should probably mention here, is that part of these layoffs are also not just people leaving the company, but also like getting absorbed by Sony proper. Put a pin in that. But they had all these incubation projects going. People were being brought in to consult on the PlayStation Live Service games to say like, hey, this is working, this isn't working. That's a lot of stuff for one studio to do. And so I do think you have to question the management decisions. We talked about the investment and the belief in that like rates would stay like positive for the company and all that, but also just the decision to chase so many dragons all at the same time. Like it's going to, when you split your attention that much, even as a like fairly large studio, that's going to create a lot of burn. That's going to create a lot of dev efforts that, it's, where does it all pan out? How does it work? And it kind of sucks that we're here at this, where like somebody upstairs had to like go in and make some pretty hard cuts. Because I don't think those cuts should have happened.
I'm going to say nice things about Final Fantasy XIV now.
Finally. It's not even the charity stream yet. We haven't reached the dono goal yet.
Everybody praises Final Fantasy XIV's expansions, and the impression that I have of them is that a lot of them are self-contained, and Final Fantasy XIV did build up to kind of a climax in some ways, and there is an overall arc, but games like expansions like Heavensward and stuff like that have a really strong story, or are known for having really strong stories. And then Square has a reputation for when the expansion is done and the patch content is done, they say, okay, well, we're going away for a while to make new content. Go play something else. Come back when you want. Oh, and by the way, if you enjoy being in this world, it can be kind of lived in, right? You can go and buy a house and build all of your stuff up. You can go and play Triple Triad. Like, there's a lot of things to do that make the world sort of lived in. And I don't know that Destiny, which is at its core less of an RPG and more of a shooter, has that. And Sonia, maybe you can kind of speak to this. It's let a lot of its other modes kind of go to seed. I don't think stuff like Crucible has a particularly good reputation, for example. So I think it's just really easy to end up bouncing off Destiny in a way that more traditional MMORPGs are a bit stickier. Am I kind of off base for saying that?
I feel like Destiny 2 doesn't really have anything to really retain players besides like the new content they put out. There's not really much to come back for. And even with like the new seasons and stuff, like last year, I would just, at one point, I felt like I was just playing because I had to write about it. Because besides that, it was like, it felt like almost like work. It didn't really feel like I wanted to be in that space for like longer than I needed to be. And Crucible, I was only really playing it for whatever reward you would get. It wasn't what it used to be, I guess. I don't like saying that, but like that's how it felt. And then especially with like even Iron Banner, which was in Destiny 1 at least, was like that big week where all the friends would get online and you'd put all the Iron Banner clothes on, like whatever, a gear on, and then you'd have the Iron Banner emblem on your name, and then everybody would join up, and then you'd play. We'd all like stream for fun. Nobody's watching our streams, but we just stream for fun. But that was like a different era of like logging on to Destiny to like be a part of something, and then now it doesn't really feel like that. And I really do wish that it jumped into like less of a shooter, even though like I know a lot of players like that about it, because it's all about, jumping in, playing the new quest or the exotic quest to get those weapons and completing big activities, raids and stuff for those weapons. But one thing I did like about the Witch Queen was like how it incorporated puzzles and it incorporated like not just the shooting factor, but like it used the lore. It used like different parts of what makes Destiny so special. Because it's not just a shooter; it has like magic and like really weird stuff. And I really wish that they capitalize on that. I wish it had housing also. That's the one thing, because like especially in the recent in the final shape, there's a part where there's one of the characters of Ala, the commander. It goes into like his past, and then he has like this little cabin, like it manifests itself in like the space inside the traveler, and it's like his cabin that he lived in. I was just looking at it, I was like, I wish I had a cabin like this in Destiny. I wish there was like something else besides just like shooting in the game.
Last point. It's been a bad year, I think, and a lot of studios, a lot of developers, a lot of studios, a lot of media websites are saying survive till 25 has become kind of the mantra. Nicole, like, is there a path where like things can get better, where we can like start to rebound? Are we just kind of at the nadir at this moment in time?
This is something that I have been asking. I've been asking this question a lot too, because I also hear the survive till 25 thing. And then I wonder, but what happens in 25? Like, what happens?
Games.
What is the big thing? It is, yes, these big games are coming out, but like, how does that
Yeah.
impact the rest of the industry? You know, like, I think that there are so many factors to consider that like on where to go next and what 2025 will be like. And I think that a lot of it is like structural problems that have been within the video game industry for a very long time. And that, I think we're seeing like, I think the number was like since 2022, we've seen like something like 30,000 layoffs in the industry. And these numbers that are being counted by these community trackers are largely based in North America and some in Europe. So the amount of layoffs that's happened over the past 3 years or 2-ish years have been, it's larger than that number. It's just that certain areas aren't being tracked as intensely as it is in North America, by North American journalists. And yeah, I don't know. I don't know what the answer is. Like I don't know. I think it has to do with institutional change and figuring out how to fix the problems that game studios have had for a really long time. And I don't think it's, we're getting a lot of these big games in 2025, but what happens after that when those games are, their time has passed? Like it's still, games are take too long to make, they're too expensive to make. Like it's, I don't know. I don't know the answer. I've been trying to figure it out and to ask a lot of people, but I don't have an answer.
The best case scenario, maybe, is that next year we're going to get the Switch 2. We'll get games like GTA 6. A lot of like big, pretty anticipated games will be coming out next year. And maybe the hope is that it will get investors excited again and wanting to spend money, because we've had this sort of contraction period where a lot of games got gobbled up. A lot of studios got gobbled up by bigger studios. A lot of newer studios have started, but haven't really produced anything. And then they're not getting the investment that they need to actually put something out. So the best case scenario is that next year things are good enough that investors get excited again. Maybe hiring starts up again and we start to kind of rebound and go back up. This particular, we're also in like a big transitional period in general for video games, not just from a console standpoint. The Nintendo Switch is as old as Destiny 2. The Switch came out the same year as Destiny 2. But in terms of how we experience games, how we play games, we got a whole new generation coming up that experiences games in a very different way from, for example, me. So I don't know. Maybe there is a light at the end of the tunnel, but it's kind of hard to fathom what it looks like. But
Yeah, I would love to consider like what does it take to get to a place in the video game industry where we're not reliant so heavily on the whims of investors.
Yeah,
and that's the problem.
That's capitalism, baby.
Yeah, that's a problem way bigger than the video game industry.
Well, pouring one out for Game Informer and definitely the people who are impacted at Bungie. The thing that really sucks is that there are a lot of creatives out there who are just doing their job and doing the best they can, and it's really demoralizing when you're just like, I'm putting out good work. I am doing what I set out to do. I am meeting all my goals. I don't have a job anymore. And because of forces that are much bigger than you, and I think that we've all felt kind of buffeted by the winds that are kind of taking over the games industry and everything in general. It's really hard. So go give a creative a job. They deserve it. All right. That's our discussion about Game Informer and Bungie. If you have thoughts, send me an email at cat@blogoutpod.com or hit me up on Twitter at @the_catbot. And now it's time for a series of random encounters. Avowed has been delayed until February, according to Xbox, because the gaming schedule, i.e. Dragon Age the Veilguard, was getting a little too crowded in the fall. I'm actually kind of okay with this, because I would like Avowed, to get a little more time in the oven. Obsidian is fairly small but mighty, and they deserve a chance to really make this game, as best that they possibly can. And also, I wanted to give it a little breathing room, and February feels maybe a little more right for this game than, say, November does. So we'll see how it goes. The Visions of Mana demo is officially out on PlayStation, Xbox, and PC. I can hear Nadia squeeing from here. Well, she's over at Otakon right now. That's why she's not here. The Veilguard will be out sometime after October 1st. We'll find out when that ends up happening. Fallout London, a mod that we haven't really had a chance to talk about on this podcast. It's been out. It's kind of annoying to access because you have to roll back your version of Fallout 4 to be able to access it. And oh, by the way, it has a ton of hard crashing issues. Nicole, have you played Fallout London?
No, but I also didn't know you had to roll back your version of Fallout 4 to play it. That is wild.
Yeah, it's because they put out a patch that basically invalidated a lot of the work that was being done on that game. So they're like, you got to roll back your version, which is why it doesn't work on Epic Game Store, but it does work on GOG and Steam. They have a whole level of instructions that you need to go through in order to make this really big mod work.
Oh boy.
Wildermyth, one of Eric's favorite games, coming to console, including Switch in October. Eric's very excited right now.
Let's go. Wildermyth Hive, rise up. Let's go.
And finally, bad news for all you Yakuza fans. The Yakuza TV show will not have karaoke. Huge oversight.
DOA.
In my opinion. Yeah. I don't know how you don't have karaoke. It's such an integral part of the show's DNA. Seriously.
I was deeply concerned that any attempt to make a Yakuza thing would just end up being like, we made a Japanese crime show. And I'm now concerned that that is exactly what has happened here. And they're going to have Cosmic Kiryu. I'm going to drop the first curse of the podcast. If he fucks in this show, I'm going to be so furious. Cosmic Kiryu cannot do that.
Nicole or Sonia, excitement about the Yakuza TV show?
I am not too familiar with it. I just started playing Yakuza Like a Dragon long ago. I just jumped into it without knowing much about the game. So, but I still enjoyed it. I have to get back to it. I didn't really know how long the game was when I started it. And I was an hour in and I was just like, I wonder how long this game is. It feels like I'm in the beginning. I looked it up and I was like, oh god. But
you're in it now.
It's yeah. I mean, it's really enjoyable. It's funny. The characters are funny. They're the fighting is different from what I normally play, so I really enjoyed that too. It's like fresh, it's nice. But even though I have like a very short experience with Yakuza, I'm still really excited to see what the show is going to be like.
Yeah, that's how I'm feeling too. I've only played Like a Dragon, so, and it's a very silly game, and I hope the TV show is very silly as well. I also was shocked by the beginning of the game and how little you do for so long.
Yeah.
It's excellent. God, I love those. I love that series so much, and so much of what I love about that series is its sense of place, its sense of like Kamurocho and all these other places as like I keep saying the word institutions this podcast, but like places that evolve over time but still stay the same. There's like a distinct feeling of nostalgia that you can get when you play Yakuza 0 and Yakuza Kiwami, and then suddenly jump forward to like Yakuza Like a Dragon, and you go back to these places, and like some of the stuff has changed, but other parts are still the same. Like the bones are there, but the outcropping is different, and like it's really cool to like see all that stuff. And I don't know how you capture that in a show. I think you can do it in a show. I think shows like The Wire have done incredible things to show like how a city and a place is a part of the story you tell. But I'm not like confident in the prestige television stuff, especially like the influx of it that we've had to handle that super well. So we'll see.
The humor is such a big part of Yakuza. The silliness. Also, is anyone else confused by the fact that there's a Yakuza Like a Dragon and a Like a Dragon Yakuza?
Yeah, I am confused.
I think they kind of, back when they made this series and they changed the name to Yakuza for the American version, I think it was, because it's always been Ryuga Gotoku in Japan, right? Like it's I think it's always been Like a Dragon in Japan, but then they realized at some point, and in Yakuza Like a Dragon, it is a like very tangible change that like, oh, we are not solely about Yakuza anymore. Like this is more of like the way that Fast 5 turned a series about stealing cars and racing them and stuff like that into like a broader, almost Mission Impossible type thing. That was the moment for Yakuza Like a Dragon. So yeah, they've had a little bit of trouble with the brand change, but I think they're figuring it out.
Speaking of things that just need to end, Fast and Furious.
Look, yes, but also I do like them. I think Mission Impossible is a higher bar. I really like the Mission Impossible movies, but
I got inducted into the Fast and Furious movies last year. I watched the first one, the second one, Fast 5, and then I watched Fast 10. And I probably should have watched Tokyo Drift for the camp value and everything, but otherwise I felt pretty good, right? It has the same problem as service games in that they got to have a new big bad every new movie, and then the big bad has to become part of the family.
Yes, yeah. It's almost more of a shonen anime type thing.
Shonen anime,
where like the villain joins the party after enough time, and so you like build this larger and larger cast until finally by the end of it, you're like, there are like 25 characters on screen right now. I don't know what's going on.
And Vin Diesel, like slowly, he gets a new final form every movie.
Justice
and the new final form is like the ridiculous stunt that they do.
Justice in the chat just said The Rock is Piccolo ? Like, you're not like totally wrong.
All right, we're moving into the tavern now. We're settling down by the fire. We're talking about what we've been playing, watching, things that are on our mind. I have some bad news for the group. I've now unlocked the second seal of nerdiness. I talked about earlier this year about how I was starting to get into Warhammer 40K.
I knew it.
While I was in San Diego, I went to a game shop and 2 Magic the Gathering decks were purchased for me. And we played. And I had a good time. And they just released this new set called Bloomborough, which has these adorable little animals. It's just Redwall. It's just Redwall, but in card form. They got little rabbits and little otters and little mice with swords. The art is adorable. And I downloaded Magic the Gathering Arena, a free-to-play Magic game, and made a deck. And I've been grinding levels in Magic the Gathering Arena. It's over for me. It's over.
So
I'm going to have so many little cards and figures around my house.
Cat, the same thing happened to me at SGF. I like took that appointment to do the Magic the Gathering Assassin's Creed set, and I walked out there and I was like, that was pretty fun. And then
That's fun.
Friend of the show, John Carson, just enabled me, and now I've been sitting here resisting. I've been doing Arena. I've not gone into the physical. I'm afraid of the physical. I know that is
Eric, are we going to play
the abyss.
Magic on the stream?
I was going to say, like, we do have a segment that is broadly just like, we're going to play multiplayer games. Like, what if we played some MTG Arena against each other?
Some Magic. Yeah. Spin up a deck or two. It's over. We're doomed.
I just got the Assassin's Creed, or my husband got it for me, the Assassin's Creed Secret Lair cards that it looks like it's like Leonardo da Vinci's like handwriting, like written notes. Like the entire card is like that. There's like no like description or anything. Like it's all written. Like it's like taken, like a page taken from his notebook. That's really cool. But yeah, I'm also getting back into Arena because that's like once you start playing Arena, you get like so into it. It's hard to stop. Like I've stayed up nights just playing games, even though like some people like leave after like 2 seconds. It gets frustrating, but like you still get so into it, especially when you're on like a winning streak. And I don't even have a special deck. I just like, I don't know what it is about it. I think it's like also a really good way to learn about the game, because I tried to learn first with the physical, and they're trying to explain to me what like why am I forgetting the word? What is it? It starts with a T. When you could attack, even though they block, it like still it goes. To,
Trample.
Trample, yeah. Oh my
yeah.
god, I was struggling so much with that. And then my husband's someone who's like gone to like MTG meets and like plays with his friends, and he has like a whole story about his MTG like whatever. But and then he's trying to teach me, he's trying to get me into it a few years ago, and yeah, it's tough getting into physical. But Arena, I do recommend that though if you're trying to get into MTG. It's a great way.
Physical is cool. The cards are pretty. I love the art. By the way, Sonia is an amazing artist. If you ever go check out her work.
Oh, thanks.
I don't know when I'll get into physical. Shivam, who is a regular on this podcast, is known as a known figure in the MTG scene and has tried to get me into it over the years, and even taught me how to play Commander at one point. I would like to be able to build a deck, but it feels very overwhelming at this moment in time. So I'm going to stick to just playing online. But it does, long-time listeners of this podcast will know that I had a Marble Snap phase.
Yeah.
I had a Hearthstone phase. And once upon a time, I would go to the gym and get on the treadmill, and I'd be playing Hearthstone, like, drafts or whatever on my phone. And Magic the Gathering Arena really gives me that same kind of energy. So I'm like, okay, I might be into this, unfortunately. So that's like the big thing that has me right now. It's Magic the Gathering.
That's how I got into like the physical too, though. Like, because learning physical first, it like makes you, at least for me, it's too much. It made me like not want to play MTG at all. And then now I've made my own like Commander deck, and then I played like I haven't played in person as much, but I won my first Commander game like not long ago, and that was exciting. I know it's a big moment, I was so happy. It's like you finally learn what all the cards mean, and you don't have to like constantly look things up. But yeah, I have to get back into MTG. I'm trying to build a second commander deck. So exciting times.
Yeah, I mostly play standard. Maybe commander is the next frontier for me, especially because the otter deck that I want to build around seems more of a commander deck than a standard deck. But Nicole, do you play Magic the Gathering? And if not, what are you playing right now?
Oh, I don't play Magic the Gathering, but about 10 years ago, I did build a deck, and it was all cats or cat-like people. Yes.
This is the way.
I have not played it once, but I played Magic the Gathering when I was in high school, but I have not played the cat deck once, or since I built that deck. So it's out there somewhere. It's in my house. It made the move with me, all the moves since then, but maybe I should find it.
Maybe you should. It's time.
But I've been playing Arranger. I just finished it, so I'm technically no longer playing it. It's a role puzzling adventure.
Role puzzling. Ooh.
Yes. Have you heard it? Have you heard of it? It's basically
I haven't.
It's got RPG-ish elements, but basically you're moving through these different levels and you shuffle. When you move, the little square you're on, it moves with you. So you're shuffling little pieces on the board of the world, and you're using that shuffling mechanic to, solve the environmental puzzles with stuff that is static and can't move. It's really interesting. The story is great, and it's just so unique. I hadn't played something like that, and it's one of those games where it's not super challenging, like it's not really hard, but there are puzzles there that like did stump me for quite a while. And when you try, and it really encourages you to just try moving places and to try things. So when you do that thing, you try something and it just suddenly works. It's one of those games that gives you that amazing jolt of serotonin, oh, I did it, and then you just and then the cycle starts over again.
It reminds me a lot of the Sokoban games. We had one recently, Void Stranger, that was basically in that Sokoban style, and this is very much like that pushing and moving style puzzle game. But the whole mechanic of it's almost like you stay static and the world moves around you, and it's really cool. It's hard to describe in words, but the second you see it, it's like, oh, I get it. I understand what we're doing here, and you start to just kind of naturally fill the gaps in your mind. And so I haven't played it yet, but everyone I've talked to has said it's you got to try this. You got to check this out. It's really, really cool.
Yeah, I've been describing it kind of as, I don't know what these are called, but the puzzles that are basically a picture in a picture frame, and it's all weird, it's all messed up, and you have to shuffle them around in the correct order to get the picture to line up. It feels like that to me. But yes, Void Stranger is a really great comparison for this, and yeah, it's really hard to describe in words, but I love it. I just blasted through it because it was so charming and fun.
You said it has RPG style elements in it. How's that manifest?
Well, it's really a light RPG, and I mean that in that you're going through it's very, you're going through a story with other characters. You're not upgrading or in any kind of way. So when I say it has RPG elements, I mean that very, very lightly. But it's more role playing in that you are this character moving through the world. It's not you don't get any upgrades. There are not weapons for you to pick up. There are weapons for you to use, but you have to use them on their place in the grid and move them. So it's very a light RPG thing. I would probably describe it role puzzling adventure is a very clever way to describe it. But yeah, the RPG elements are extremely light, but it's very sweet.
Strong year for puzzle games between this and Animal Well.
Oh, and Lorelei and the Laser Eyes, so good.
Ooh, yeah.
I I've been having a hard time figuring out what my top 10 for the year will look like. It feels very unsettled. But I have to say puzzle game fans are really eaten between those games.
Yeah, I keep a little list in my notebook, and like I put stars next to all the ones. Like it's all puzzle games that have stars next to them.
Sonia, how about you?
I was like really burnt out from games for a while, so I'm jumping back into like all the ones I didn't finish. But all these puzzle games sound so interesting. Like I need to write down a list of like I looked up the one Nicole mentioned too, and the art is so adorable.
Cute.
But yeah, I'm just playing Death's Door, Chicory, like games. I don't know when they came out, a while ago.
It's a really great time to dig into sort of your backlog. Before this show started, Nicole and I were talking about starting up new farms in Stardew Valley 1.6. Can we put a patch on our top 10 of the year?
I have, like,
Yeah.
I have. I'm pretty sure Polygon has like a running list of like the best games of the year so far, and I'm pretty sure we put Stardew Valley on there because though the Stardew Valley patch like wasn't like overwhelmingly changing the game, it did change the game in such great ways for me. I think yes to a patch.
I was looking at the change list and just the sheer number of things that they update, including the new starting farm, which is delightful. Just it makes it feel so fresh to me. I love little touches like being able to get multiple pets and put hats on them. I like that whenever these new patches come out, they always end up adding a lot of like little cutscenes and everything. You want to talk about a game that feels super lived in and everything, a forever game where people just continually spin up new games and keep playing. Like Stardew Valley really gets it right?
Oh yeah, it's so good. I didn't play the 1.5 patch, so it had been a little bit for me, and so it actually had been a really long time for me. So coming back to 1.6, it felt like probably a bigger change than maybe for people who had been playing continuously. But yeah, they do a really great job, and I think it's partially because you can jump in so easily, and just like you just start. You don't have all this content that's like seemingly waiting for you. It doesn't feel confusing, like, and maybe that's just me with Destiny, but like just Destiny just feels scary to jump in. Where
Yeah,
Stardew Valley is like you're just starting your farm.
Destiny's too much. When you have too many things happening all at once and you're in a giant hub and you're like, who are all these vendors? I don't even know. Where do I play the game?
Yeah, how do I even get into the game?
You mentioned that you're a Pokemon fan, Nicole. Have you ever played Pokemon Puzzle Challenge?
No, actually, I have not.
So it's a Tetris Attack style game with like match 3, and it's on the Game Boy Color, and I've been playing it on my analog Pocket a lot, and it's adorable. It came out in kind of the gold and silver era, so it has more of those starters in there. It has a challenge mode where you're fighting all of the gyms and then the Elite Four. And it's pretty tough, but also at the same time pretty accessible and really satisfying, a lot of fun. And it's just been my sort of go-to. When I was sitting on a beach last week in San Diego after Comic-Con, and I brought my Pocket with me, and I was jumping between Castlevania Aria of Sorrow, a really excellent Metroidvania, and Pokemon Puzzle Challenge, which just a really great little pick up and play kind of game, and the graphics and art are gorgeous for a Game Boy Color game. Really, really, really good. If you can get a hold of a copy, I strongly recommend.
I just looked it up and it looks so good. Like this
It's
is
perfect.
exactly
Yeah.
what I need in my life.
There you go. There's my recommendation for you if you like puzzle games. Eric, what about you?
Yeah, I've got an old game and a new game to talk about this week. Let's do the old game first.
Old and new.
As y'all know, I've been
new.
playing FF6 on the Esper Quest streams. We actually did one yesterday. We flipped the days because usually I stream on Sundays, but we were recording this on Sunday right now, so I did it on Saturday. Y'all know FF6 kind of slaps? Like that game kind of goes hard.
No way. Really? Final Fantasy VI?
I was sitting there and just being like, this game, because someone in the chat had asked me, I think it was Shareable Texas, had asked me, what is, like compared to FF10, how is FF6 holding up? Because people know at home, 10 is my favorite Final Fantasy so far. And I was saying, 10 is really an interesting comparison point because while 10 is a really strong personal story about like two main leads of like Titus and Yuna, FF6 is like a real ensemble story. Like there's so many characters and each of them have such like rich like stories happening that you can follow and like paths that you can like that lead to them joining your party and then things that happen afterwards. That it's hard to feel like there's a main character, quote unquote, of FF6. I think you could make an argument that Terra is probably the main character, but like you could just as easily say Edgar or Locke or Sabin are like kind of the main characters at any point in time.
It's an ensemble.
Yeah. But I hit the point where I was on the Crescent Isle and I was dealing with the Espers there, and then like everything's hunky dory, it's all great, and I hear the little in the back, and that little fucker hops down with his Magitech army, and all the stuff plays out in like the battle screen where I'm doing the scene with like Leo and Kefka in the battle screen, and all this stuff is happening, and I'm just sitting there like they had just pixels to work with on the SNES, and this is what they were cooking. Like they cooked this on the Super Nintendo, and it really was an amazing moment where I was saying like I had the same thing with Chrono Trigger, and I do think that right now in my personal estimation Chrono Trigger is like above FF6 for me, just because like Chrono Trigger is so focused and contained in such a little like box of just everything incredible about RPGs. I think FF6 is more sprawling, more open, but it's also in that way you can like mess with it more. There's kind of more room to gear out characters differently, affect their growth with what espers you give them, to like kind of have characters do different things. And I'm really enjoying the contrast between the two. But I went to the Chad made sure I went to a little island. They were like, just go to this island. There's a monster there that you should probably fight so you can get it on the Veldt and get Gao's ability for it. And I go into a fight. It's called the Intangier, and there's nothing on the screen. There's like nothing there, and I'm like, the hell is going on? What are we doing here? Like, is this like a ghost or something that I'm fighting? It's like, I can't see it. I can't hit it. So I guess I'll just have, I think Celeste has scan. I'll have Celeste scan for it. And she scans, and then like the slow roll comes down, and it's a behemoth from like the FF6 behemoth is also a ghost that only appears when you scan it. And then its pixel art shows up, and it is the most monstrous dude you have ever seen in your life. And I was sitting there, and people were joking in the chat that was like, oh, FF6 has jump scares. Yeah, I was sitting there like, oh no, like something really just went bad here. And he drops a meteor on me, and it was just, this game is amazing. I think the journey of going back to
Yoshitaka Amano art right there.
Yes, the journey of going back to these classics is really fun. It's making me even more excited for finishing FF6. So we are going to do another stream sometime this week so I can wrap all the side quests before we go to the next part, because I believe the next part is the floating continent, and once we clear that, we will be in the second half of the game, and we will be locked out of some things.
What a big moment.
Yeah, so
you saw the General Leo stuff.
Yes. Oh,
your heart's broken? Is your heart broken?
That's the thing, is I sit there all the time and I'm like, FF6 has probably a shorter word count for a lot of these, moments between characters, because they have maybe like 2 conversations between Terra and Leo, but they do so much with those conversations and with like the limits that they have, that when those moments happen, you do feel a lot of emotion about it. And I'm like, it's amazing what they managed to pull out of like when you boil it down and distill it, they really get like the big moments right, and they nail these characters and the way they feel about things in a way that other games with larger word counts and more cutscenes and stuff like that can't get quite right. There's like a focus to FF6 that feels really, really good. So yeah, the general Leo stuff was great. I'm really enjoying the game so far. Cyan is still the worst character in the party. He's not getting invited anywhere. He's just sitting back on the airship with the toxic male influencer that is Setzer, and they're just sitting together like, nobody invites us anywhere.
Hasn't Cyan's heart been broken enough?
Yeah, he can cry about it on the blackjack, all right? Like he's got to deal with his problems. So that's the old game. FF6 still very good. New game, I've been playing SteamWorld Heist 2.
Yeah. Is it good?
It is good. I like it very much. I will preface this by saying that like the review embargo is up. I have not played nearly enough to like review it. I'm probably about like a couple hours ahead of where I was playing at SGF. I really like the early game of SteamWorld Heist 2. It is kind of the evolution that I would have wanted from a new SteamWorld Heist. I think there's a lot of really
XCOM/tactics game.
Yes, yeah. So it's a 2D side-scrolling XCOM tactics game where you have this ragtag crew.
Projectiles.
Yeah. You have a ragtag crew of bandits and mercenaries and other such ne'er-do-wells, but you're like thieves with hearts of gold. You're helping the people out.
Robots.
You are robots, and yeah, like you said, the bouncing shots, knocking hats off and bouncing shots is like the key of SteamWorld Heist 2. So all of that is back, and ricocheting shots off of like corners and like doing these long sniper bullets where you like bounce it around the level and like nail a robot around a corner who thinks he's behind cover and stuff like that is still absolutely great. The big thing for this one, 2 big things, one good, one bad. The good big thing for this one is the job system feels really robust. There's this whole idea of everybody has a different class based on what weapon you're holding. So if you're holding a shotgun, you're a flanker, you kind of move faster, you have the ability to sprint and then shoot afterwards and stuff like that. But then when you swap classes to, say, a sniper, you can use cogs, which are a separate resource that each character has internally, to kind of take skills from other classes and apply them to yourself. It's very FF Tactics in a way that I really like. And it makes a lot of sense for games like this to have your characters kind of multi-class around and learn a bunch of stuff and then kind of bring it back to what you would consider their core class. Like Daisy is my sniper. Like she is my S tier sniper, and she's got a lot of stuff that really enables her to be a good sniper. But I'm having her learn like Reaper skills so that way she gets like some extra abilities. I want to have her do flanker a little bit so she can get some extra movement and stuff like that. And it just helps like build these characters out and also kind of forces you to play differently in a way that I find like very natural. I think that stuff is great. The bad. You have a submarine that you drive around because we're not in space like the first SteamWorld Heist. You're in the ocean. It's like very Caribbean.
And this being in space. So I like the Firefly vibes.
Yeah, I think the concept for Heist 2 is really good. I love the sort of Pirates of the Caribbean vibe here that we have, where you're kind of this crew going around. There is like the Navy that is controlling all the stuff, and you're beating up the Navy and taking back the water, the gallons, and taking it back to the people. You're very Robin Hood in that way. Driving the submarine that your kind of mobile base, your Normandy, is not great. It's really not great. They have a lot of like ship to ship combat that is just kind of, you steer around and you have like cones of fire that if you get someone within your cone, it'll do damage to them and then run out and have to like recharge. But actually steering the ship and getting those cones and like doing all the ship fighting stuff doesn't feel great. And I've seen a lot of people who have played further into this game say that their 2 biggest gripes are, number one, that's a bit long compared to most other SteamWorld Heist game or SteamWorld games. Like I think SteamWorld games are kind of known for being fairly tight packages, like 20-hour games that you can really get a lot out of. I think of like SteamWorld Dig 2 or SteamWorld Quest as being games that you can really like spend a couple weekends with, wrap up, roll credits, and you've really seen a lot of that design space, and they've really done everything they could with it. And apparently this one kind of drags on a little bit, but also the submarine stuff apparently only gets more involved to its detriment and stuff like that. I've already not enjoyed it where I'm at in the game, and I could see if there's even more of it and it gets more involved, then I could see how that becomes like a negative for the game. But I think if you're looking for like a tactics game, especially that feels really good on the Steam Deck, like SteamWorld on the Steam Deck, it works. But like I've played some on my PC at home and then some on my like Steam Deck, and it works on the Steam Deck. It's fantastic on there. I really do love the SteamWorld games.
It?
Yes, yeah, I do love the SteamWorld games.
You would
games
recommend it?
Absolutely, yeah. I love the SteamWorld games. I think they're excellent. I think this is a good new entry in the SteamWorld thing. It just comes with that like little asterisk, but honestly, like if you want a new tactics game, like SteamWorld Heist 2 is a good new tactics game and worth some time.
Nicole, Sonia, SteamWorld takes?
Literally none.
I didn't know about this game, but it sounds like there's a lot.
The cool thing about SteamWorld is that there's a lot of different styles of game, like SteamWorld Dig, SteamWorld Heist, others. SteamWorld Dig and SteamWorld Dig 2 are kind of the best known of them, I think.
Yes, there's like SteamWorld Dig was like the start of it, and that was like a Dig Dug Metroidvania, which was like a really novel idea and I think works super well. And then Dig 2 is honestly like a step up in every way, in my opinion. Quest is like the deck builder one. I think that is like a massively underrated game, to be honest. Like it's a really cool,
not bad,
like,
yeah.
Like it's an RPG meets Slay the Spire, and it's very like character driven, and I think a lot of people would like it. Then you have like SteamWorld Build, which I think is the one that was not done by them. It was done by a different development studio, but under Thunderful. I heard some decent things about that. I never really got too into it outside the demo, but like Heist was always the other one that was a big one that people love to talk about. Obviously, it was in our Patreon selection 1 month, and I'm glad to see they went back to this formula and did more of it, because like we also like we need more tactics games. I'm just going to come out and boldly say it that like we need more tactics games, but like tactics games are really enjoyable. They're really fun. They're really great on like portable consoles, your Steam Decks and your Switches, and it still feels like there's so much design space within that. And so like between SteamWorld Heist 2 and then Demon School, which is set to come out next month, and I'm really looking forward to. Yeah, like I think for me right now, we are at like number 1, a visual novel renaissance, or sorry, Vic, visual novel / adventure game renaissance. And please don't edit, baby. And number 2, like a tactics game like resurgence, and people wanting to like play more of these, develop more of these, do more of these. And so I feel like SteamWorld Heist 2 is a good entry in that resurgence.
Okay, go check out SteamWorld Heist 2. Normally, this would be the part where I would tell Nadia to take it home, but as I already mentioned, she's at Otakon. So, Eric, take us home.
I have to do pit duty. I asked before the podcast if I've ever told the metronome story on here, and Kat did not recall it, so I will tell the metronome story on here. When I was younger, I was a bit of a prankster. I don't know if y'all were. Did you ever like pulling pranks when you were younger?
No, I was too nice.
Again, I was too shy.
Yeah, same.
Y'all, prank. Look, they're fun pranks. They're not like mean pranks. They're fun pranks. And this one was like my coup de grace. I would say this is the best prank I've ever pulled. So I was in band when I was younger, and I noticed, you get used to hearing a metronome all day when you're in like the band hall and stuff like that, right? It's just that constant like bop, bop, of somebody in a practice room, someone like in the actual band hall itself, they're working on classes, wherever, there's always kind of like some metronome going. It like fades into the background, but I was like, man, what if you like slowed a metronome all the way down, made it really, really quiet, and then just like hit it somewhere, like the Telltale Heart. I'm also a big fan of Edgar Allan Poe. So like, what if I Telltale Hearted somebody with a metronome? So one of my directors, I decided to make him my subject. And throughout the week, I was gradually hiding a like little pocket metronome that I had found, and just put it on a really low volume and really slow, so it was just like a little dun, and then it would go a really long time and another dun, and I would hide it places all over his office. He always found it really fast. Like I hid it in a Diet Coke pack, and that didn't work super well. I hid it like in drawers and stuff. It was always found. So one day I had the spark of inspiration. I taped it to the bottom of his rolling chair. Which, yeah, I will say, even the time when I put it in the seal, I put it in like the roof tiles, like I moved the roof tile and put it in there, he found it pretty fast.
Wow.
What the rolling chair did was it made it mobile. And so I did this. I taped it under the chair, and then I had an off period, so I left. I went home for a bit and then came back because I had to pick my brother up from school. And when I walked in, one of my friends walked in and he was like, "Hey, did you put a metronome in the director's office?" And I was like, "Yeah." And they were like, "Don't go over there." And I was like, "What happened?" Apparently, they had some sort of meeting in that room and heard the metronome and had torn the office apart looking for it. They were like pulling drawers out, moving tiles, like shifting everything. And because it was taped to the bottom of the chair, they would like move the chair to get out of the way and stuff like that. And so it would move around the room, and they'd be like, "Where is it coming from? Where is it coming from?" I will never match that again. Apparently it was just incredible. It really worked out, but also I avoided the band hall for a bit because it was in the moment a little infuriating for them. So, but I was very proud of that one. I've pulled many other pranks in my life that have worked out pretty well, but that one I think was the piece de resistance. So let me tell y'all, pulling pranks can be fun. It can be a good time. Prank your friends a little bit. Good ones that don't hurt people, that don't be mean to them or anything. Just little goofs.
Don't ruin things.
My best
A
part
very
is jumping out at someone, like they're in the bathroom or something, and you stand there waiting.
Yeah.
That's all I got. It's all I've got. It's all I got.
Jumping out at someone, like just surprising them, like jump scaring them.
Yep. Yeah. Just
Okay.
being like, there's actually, I'll tell this very, very quickly. My sister, was going to prank my other sister, and she hid in the bathroom behind the shower curtain. My other sister had come home and she was having a really bad day, and she was outside the bathroom before my sister was going in, and she was telling my mom about this bad day. But my sister in the bathroom was like, "Oh no, should I do it? And then she just committed too hard. So when my sister, who had the bad day, went into the bathroom, she still jumped out at her from the shower, and just we can laugh about it now.
That's the important part, is you got to be able to laugh about it at some point. Sometimes people get pranks, they can get you a little worked up in the moment, but it's good to laugh, get everybody in on the joke.
The key is to have a very literary prank like Eric's, which I appreciate. If you can compare it to the Telltale Heart, I think you're doing okay.
Yeah.
The tall tale I always enjoyed hearing, and I think this is like spread from school to school, so I don't think it was actually specific to our school, but there was always legend of someone at a high school who had pulled a prank where they had let 3 pigs loose in the high school, and they put a 1, a 2, and a 4 on the side of the pigs. And so not only did you have 3 pigs loose, but then people spend forever looking for number 3. And that, that's real good.
What's worse than...
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think that was a legend at my high school, too.
I think it was like the Mewtwo or the Mew that's secretly under the bus near the SSN. Like, that was just the tall tale that went around to every school. But yeah.
I could only do jump scare pranks, too, because, like, I don't have a good poker face. Like, I just start smiling, laughing, giggling, or whatever if I had to do something where, like, I'm trying to trick somebody in, like, a really clever way. I can't do it. That's why I just have to, like, hide and, like, boo. That's it.
And on that note, that is it for this week's episode of Acts of the Blood God. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you so much to our special guests, Nicole and Sonia. One more time, where can we find you, Nicole?
Well, you can read things that I've written at Polygon and on Twitter at Sweet Potatoes.
And Sonia.
I work on a column. I'm a columnist at Unwinnable, so You could read my work there. And then on Twitter, it's my name, Sonia, so SANIYA, and then GA.
And of course, if you enjoy the show, please leave us a review on the podcatcher of your choice. Follow us on Patreon, patreon.com/bloodgodpod, where for just $1 a month, you can get access to our Discord and the regular weekly show ad-free. Keep an eye out for our Pantheon, which is happening next week. That is a subscriber-only podcast, Pokemon Red and Blue. Very exciting. And our charity stream, which is happening on August 17th and 18th with a parade of amazing special guests and giveaways, all in support of Trans Lifeline. We're heading over now to the post show to hang out with the Stars of Destiny and chat with them and have a good time. And this week we are joined by Anthrax Bees, Criminal Justice, who's one of our intrepid mods. Sorry that we didn't pick Dragon's Dogma, Justice, Drew RWX, Flashback 2012, Harvest Lunatic, and Laguna Matata 124. We'll be back next week. I've been your host, Kat Bailey, and for Nicole, Sonia, Eric, and myself, thanks for listening. Happy adventuring.